Elon Musk has something of a point when it comes to social media censorship and freedom of speech. Now, I disagree with him on how this plays out in many ways. However, is there a problem with regards to deplatforming certain figures or certain arguments because people don't like them? Yes, there is. If you look at the Hunter Biden story and how that was erased from Twitter and how it even temporarily lost the platform for the New York Post. I don't like it. It's a right-wing rag, as we'd say, but it's still a newspaper. And in this instance, they've done some good journalism and they've got a story. But because that was a story which people in Silicon Valley didn't like, because it would bolster Donald Trump, who they don't like, I don't like him either, they suppressed it. They silenced it. Now, I think this is bad, not because I'm a fan of Donald Trump, but because these things inevitably come out. And there is already a huge level of distrust in both politicians and the media. And if you have people like Twitter suppressing stories like the Hunter Biden laptop, that only comes out anyway, and it only makes distrust even worse. And that is exactly the set of conditions on which someone like Donald Trump, or I think maybe even worse in the future, thrives on. You have to have a balanced playing field. You have to have media outlets which are discernibly fair to both sides. You have to have media outlets which go out of their way to give a platform to arguments they might not like. Why? Because you can't be sure of what you think unless you're stress testing the very arguments that you're putting forward. Now, how do you do that? Well, you put forward the opposite argument. The problem is we have a media environment where people don't want to be subject to the opposite argument. They want to hear more of the same. Now, I can understand that to an extent in a newspaper or a TV channel, because look, if the Washington Post says one thing, you can always read the New York Times or the Boston Globe, or you can go to another media outlet and find a different point of view. With social media networks, it's different, because that's the town square. That's not a single outlet where you'll see competing positions and points of view. That's where everybody goes to talk. And if you silence one particular argument or one particular person, you've got to have a damn good reason to do so. And the truth is that Elon Musk is right. The threshold in terms of censoring certain people and certain arguments has been far too low with Twitter. We crossed something of a Rubicon when a former president of the United States is blocked from a social media website. And I'm sure some people disagree, but it to me is setting up the conditions for the utter polarization of politics. It's basically saying that man isn't going to be on Twitter or on Facebook or on YouTube or wherever. Well, what if he wins the Republican primary? What if he wins the presidential election in 2024? What's that saying to all the people that vote for him? You don't have a voice either. We decide whether or not you have representation in the media. I don't think that's wise. And what we see with Trump time and time again from the media, we saw it before 2016, where everything he said was sort of mocked by the media. They gave him non-stop coverage because of this kind of guerrilla marketing, which he's so expert at, fusing politics and celebrity. They got that wrong. And now with the censorship, they're getting it wrong too. They've completely overcompensated. What you need to do with political figures like Trump is robustly criticize the political arguments they're making. That's the one thing that the US media failed to do. And I think removing a platform on social media isn't solving the problem. I think it's making it worse. I'm sympathetic to many of the criticisms about Elon Musk buying Twitter, and I don't think the world's wealthiest person should own a social network. I think this is probably the hallmark of how backwards we've gone as a society. However, when I see people who work at Twitter saying that they're vomiting because this guy's buying the company or they're going to leave, or users saying I'm going to leave the platform because of the owner, this isn't a workers' co-op. This is a commercial profit-seeking business. I don't quite understand what their misgivings are. And Twitter is not acting in the public interest. It's acting to make profits for people, for all kinds of reprehensible people. You've got the Saudis. Are these good people? Do you really think Elon Musk is worse than those people? Because I'm no fan of Elon Musk, and I can assure you, he's not. He's not as bad as the Saudi royal family. So I think some perspective is needed. And the idea that you're going to leave Twitter because you don't like the owner, I just find strange. But in a way, that's all liberals are left with, right? Because historically, it would have been trying to cancel him. Well, you can't cancel the guy when he owns the platform, which shows the limits of that critique of power. Now, I believe in freedom of speech. Why? Well, it's because I'm a socialist. And I recognise that today, most people in Britain, the United States, and Europe, across the world, don't agree with my views on public ownership, eradicating poverty, on how we redistribute wealth. The only way that's going to change is if people are persuaded that they're wrong and that socialist arguments are right. but they can't be persuaded unless you have freedom of expression and freedom of speech. That's why freedom of speech is a fundamental principle for the left, which it should defend. Now, Elon Musk says he loves freedom of speech too. To an extent he does. I'm sure he would want a wide and vast range of people on social media making all range of arguments, but the group of people he's not fond of when it comes to freedom of speech is workers organising, particularly in his factories, particularly in Tesla or SpaceX, or heaven forbid if Twitter workers start organising for better working conditions and higher pay, he'll want them out on their ear. So freedom of speech changes depending on who you ask. If it's on a culture wars issue and you're mocking a group of people which historically have got a really bad deal, it's freedom of speech. I don't agree with it, but they can say it. But the second it comes to workers saying, well, we want better paying conditions, Mr. Musk, you're worth $260 billion, you have these huge companies, we would want a bigger share in the wealth that we all create. No, thank you. So when we talk about free speech, we have to listen to the person who's demanding it, what their background is, and what their material interests are when they talk about it. They don't often like free speech when it has concrete implications for their own wealth. And this is why the left is a champion of free speech, because we know that it's critical to workers organising, to marginalised minorities, having a louder voice in broader social conversations, and we know that social progress can't happen without it. I think one of the tragedies of the last 10 years is allowing free speech to be something of a wrecking ball for the right. Somehow we've ended up in this bizarre world where Piers Morgan and Elon Musk are the avatars of free speech. The minute Piers Morgan hears something he disagrees with or doesn't like, he has to waltz out of a TV studio. He can't take criticism, but he loves free speech. Well, he loves free speech, which he agrees with. So the left has to defend this, and it has to win back that concept of free speech from these charlatans, frankly, who either don't know what it means or deploy it in highly instrumental, self-interested ways. Freedom of speech is not easy, and freedom of expression is an important right. You can't have effective political debate without freedom of speech. It underpins so much else. You can't address solutions, you can't overcome challenges without debate. So there's a real obvious continuum there. Free speech, debate, problem solving. And politics without problem solving is pointless. Now, some of the sort of answers around this is that, well, Elon Musk, if he becomes the owner of Twitter, he can guarantee freedom of speech. And in many ways, these are reminiscent of the arguments that you would see in the 18th century about an enlightened despot. We can guarantee the rights and freedoms of everyone if we have this figure, a monarch, above everyone else, and they will allow the rules of the game to be fair. They'll give a level playing field. The rule of law will apply equally to everyone. Now, in the 21st century, we know that enlightened despotism didn't work. If you wanted the guarantee of the rule of law, if you wanted a society run in the interest of the majority, that necessitated democracy. Government by the people, of the people, for the people. Looking at Twitter, it seems that we have similar debates going on right now as to what we saw with 18th century politics. People look at Musk as this enlightened despot, and he's the one that's going to solve the problems. But the idea that the rights we all enjoy and need to create a good society will be guaranteed by a single person, well, look, we've got 250 years of that. There's no good examples of it working. So we need to start thinking more broadly about how we regulate these systems in the public interest and make them accountable to democratic oversight. I think that's the best guarantor of freedom of speech and freedom of expression. And it's far more likely to succeed in the long term than relying on one person. There's a reason why Elon Musk has just bought Twitter. There's a reason why Rupert Murdoch owns The Sun. These people want media which advances their interests. Now, the only way we can build a society where working people have politics in their interests is by having media outlets of our own. Double Down News has done extraordinary work in the last few years on a shoestring. I can't recommend them enough. Support them on their Patreon.